So what I was saying is, if we look in our hypergraph, we have a list of nodes that have red lettering rather than the typical black. That means that this is a referenced node. Okay, it's referenced in from a different file. You'll see also that attached to those are two nodes, two shape nodes. And they have black names. That means they were generated by this file. Okay. And then we have, yeah, so we have this other one. I'm not going to explain this right now, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that. So if I have my bones, the bones selected on the upper section, then I'll see that there's two different skin clusters being controlled by this bone. Okay. Now, if you remember, when I had the cog joint selected, which is the center joint, if we notice in the outputs, it only has one skin cluster attached to it. Okay. So that'll make more sense as we dive in. Now, to paint weights, there's multiple ways we can do this. The first way I would like to draw your attention to is if we were to go to our vertex selection, and then select a group of vertices. Okay. So if you notice, okay, if I right click and go to select vertices, and then I drag select over joints, it's going to select those joints. The joints have a higher selection priority. How do you get around that? Well, if you select the mesh and hit F8 on your keyboard, that gives the component mode a higher priority than objects. So now I can drag select some vertices without selecting my joints. And that's why I say get used to using the F8 key to switch from component mode to object mode, because it will always do what you want it to do that way. Okay, so to continue on, the nitty-gritty way to get down and paint weights is actually not paint them at all, but just to set their values. So if we go to Window, General Editors, Component Editor, and then we select this tab up top called Smooth Skins, then it's going to give me a list of vertices along the left side here, and it's going to give me a list of bones along the top. Okay. So if I maximize this, we can have a look at it. Now, because in my skin bind settings in the options box, remember for the skin bind, I told it to only use a single joint for one vertice. Don't divide up the weighting. And so all you're going to see in this editor right now are zeros and ones. This particular vertice, vertice 179, is being controlled 100% by the cog_bind joint. Okay, the other thing to note that's most important, and this is called normalized weights, is if you look at the total column, all of these should always say 1. If it has more or less than 1, then that means the vertice is being controlled less than 100% or more than 100%. Which will give you weird behavior. Okay, so if you're getting weird behaviors, this is where I would come first and check and see if any of these values are not at 1. Okay, now I can change values in here. I could select a couple of these. I don't even know what this vertice is, but I could select a couple cells by drag selecting and set them both to 0.5. Now I entered 0.5, right? But if you look close, it didn't actually do that for me. It didn't do what I told it to do. And this is the annoying part of painting weights in Maya. It's constantly trying to make decisions for you. Okay? So the second box that I selected, the one I actually entered the value into, it did get a 0.5, but the other two the other one got a 0.25, and then this seemingly random joint got 0.25. Again, for a total of 1, so it did that well. So what do we do to get by that? Oh, and look at that. So I deselected, I changed my selection, and it even adjusted the weights one more time. Okay. So this is the nightmare that is painting weights that we're all going to have fun experiencing. Now, the way to get around this, if I set this value to 0.5 for vertex 0 on the upper bind joint, then it goes to 0.5. And I don't really care what happens to the other stuff. But if I turn hold on for that particular joint by entering a 1 in there or typing on, then this weight value should not be allowed to change. There are ways to make it, but I'm not going to discuss those, not yet. But you'll see that if I type in 0.75 in this top 1_R_bind, that it only, even though I typed in 0.75, it only went to 0.5. That's because with this hold turned on for the upper bind, it doesn't allow this value to change. And so there was only 0.5, there's only 50% left to go to this vertice. Okay? So, and if I didn't want that to change, then I would turn that joint to hold, and then I'd go to another vertex, and I could say, well, I want that to be a value of 1. So I press 1 and type 1, press enter, and nothing happens because it's being held on the other 2 joints. Okay, now this is the kind of the Excel version of painting weights. It actually can be quite useful. One other thing you can do when painting weights is you can shift these values with this slider down here. So it has a 0 to 1 value, and the current value is at 0.5. So I could grab this handle and drag it up, and if I let go, and after I deselect that cell, it's going to update the other cells so that, again, there's a total of 1. Now I'm saying the total of 1 a lot because it's very, 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 very important. I need to add a lot of emphasis to that. Okay, so now there's another way to paint weights that's probably at least seemingly more desirable. You guys may be already familiar with, and that's to the Paint Skin Weights tool. The easiest way to get there, is to right-click on your mesh and go to Paint, Skin Cluster, and then you can select the skin cluster that you want to paint. Now with a vertex selection, instead of selecting the whole object, I will only be able to edit the weighting information for the vertices that are selected. If I press F8 on my keyboard, it will select the entire mesh, and now I can edit any of the weighting information on any of the vertices in the entire mesh. Okay, so that's something important to note. Now, I need to open up my tool settings. You can do that a few different ways. You can double click over here in the toolbar or toolbox. You can open tool settings from this tab on the right. For some of you, that tab may be on the left. Or you can come up here to the top and click on this Show Hide Tool Settings. So I clicked that, and it brings up this user interface. And there's a lot of information in here. First thing you'll notice is it has a list of all of the joints that are affecting this particular mesh. If I were to change